Order. The one thing that underpins everything we've talked about so far, power. At its absolute core, power is the ability to make things happen. It's the capacity to get other people to act in a certain way, even if they don't want to. The sociologist Max Weber drew a really important line between two types of power. On one hand, you have coercive power, which is just force, making someone obey through threats. But then you have consensual power, which he called authority. This is totally different. This is when people obey because they believe the person or the rule has a legitimate right to be followed. And this authority comes in three main flavors. You've got charismatic authority, which is all about the unique personality and vision of a leader. Then there's traditional authority, which is based on custom. We obey because, hey, that's just how it's always been done. And finally, you have rational legal authority, which is huge in modern societies. That's based on a belief in the system of laws and procedures itself. But you know, in our world today, power has gotten a little tricky. The philosopher Michel Foucault argued that modern power is often opaque. It's hard to see. It's not just a king on a throne giving orders anymore. It's exercised through these subtle forms of surveillance. Everything from cameras on the street to the way our data is collected on our phones, all of it quietly shaping our behavior. So here's a final thought I want to leave you with. The next time you find yourself whispering in a library, or stopping at a red light in the middle of the night, or even just liking a post online, just take a second. Ask yourself why. Is it a totally free choice? Is it just a habit you never really thought about? Or are you playing a tiny part in a much, much grander, invisible design that shapes all of us?
Blueprint for Black Power, Chapter 11, Ideology and the Legitimization of Dominance, pages 220 to 230. In our second chapter, we discussed a number of sources or bases of power. Examples are economic resources, authority, class membership, family culture, organization, and the like. However, a source of power more fundamental than these, in fact, the ultimate base of power for the other power sources, is that of the power of ideas. The power of the mind, of thought, imagination, and vision, the power of symbols and the world, the power of ideation and the translation of ideation into action are manifested in a multitude of personal, social, cultural, and physical forms. For ideas are actualized and incarnated in patterns of social attitudes, relations, and organizations, and social and physical products and abilities and inabilities, superordinations and subordinations. Knowledge is the idea, the product of ideation, reciprocity, interacting with reality. Therefore, if knowledge is power, ideas have power. Ideas can be coerced and compelling. Beliefs, symbols, doctrines, and idea systems can enable or empower men through their capacity to induce them into states of consciousness conducive to the achievement of other personal and social goals that would not be achieved by other means. Indeed, as Dr. Thomas Dye asserts, whole societies are shaped by systems or ideas that we frequently refer to as ideologies. He goes on to define an ideology as an integrated systems of ideas that provide society and its members with the rationalizations for the way of life, guides for evaluating righteousness and wrongness, and emotional impulses to action. The relationship between socioeconomic power and social ideology is an intimate one. For ideology legitimates power systems, hierarchical structures, and social relations through the provisions of relationships and justifications for the exercise of power and the necessity of certain social relations. If ideology successfully justifies the distribution and exercise of power within social relations, then it represents itself as a potent source of control over the consciousness and behavior of the participants. Ideologies control people's behavior in several ways. One, ideologies affect perception. Ideas influence what people see in the world around them. Ideologies frequently describe the character of human beings in society. They help us become aware of certain aspects of society, but often impair our ability to see other aspects. Ideologies may distort or oversimplify in their effort to provide a unified and coherent account of society. Two, ideologies rationalize and justify a way of life and hence provide legitimacy for the structure of society. An ideology may satisfy the status quo, or it may provide a rationale for change or even for revolution. Three, ideologies provide normative standards for determined righteousness and wrongness in the affairs of society. Ideologies generally have a strong moral component. Occasionally, they even function as religions, complete with prophets like Marx's scriptures, the Communist Manifesto, saints. They also come with saints like Lenin, Stalin, and Mao, and visions of utopia, a communist society. And four, ideologies provide motivation for social and political action. They give their followers a motive to act to improve world conditions. Ideologies can convert individuals to a particular social or political movement and arouse them to action. In the context of this chapter, we will speak of ideology in terms of its use by the ruling class or dominant groups to justify the existing social order. In this sense, we follow Jeffrey Riemann in asserting that when ideas, however, unintentionally distort reality in a way that justifies the prevailing distribution of power and wealth, hides society's injustices, and thus secures uncritical allegiance to the existing social order, we have what Marx called ideology. So, to the naive but acute observer of the American political and economic system, it is amazingly baffling in that the face of gross and rapidly increasing inequalities in wealth and power, social status and influence, social health and welfare, and the vast majority of the population who bear the burden of those inequalities do not utilize their vaunted freedom of speech and assembly to engage in fundamentally questioning the political, economic, legal institutions for the systems and organize to transform them so that they produce more equitable and salutatory outcomes. The fact that this system has not been transformed toward such outcomes amplifies that despite its gross inequalities and inadequacies, a critical mass of the populace must accept the ideology used to rationalize and justify its existence. Obviously, those most interested and active in inculcating and sustaining such an ideology will be those who are the chief beneficiaries of the socioeconomic status and those who believe they stand to gain in the future from its continuance, and or who fear losing what they have, though it may be less than they need if the system were to be reconstructed. It should be apparent in such a system that the rich and powerful have an especially strong interest in promulgating and elaborating the prevailing ideology which legitimates the socioeconomic status. The rich and powerful in this context of all groups which compose American society have the greatest need for ideology and to see the order of groups well indoctrinated with it. A simple and persuasive argument can be made for the claim that the rich and powerful in America have an interest in conveying an ideological message to the rest of the nation. The have-nots and the have-littles far outnumber the have-plenties. This means, to put it rather crudely, the have-nots and the have-littles could have more if they decided to take freedom from the have-plenties. It's really just that simple. This in turn means that the have-plenties need the cooperation of the have-nots and have-littles, because the have-plenties are such a small minority that they could never force this cooperation on the have-nots and have-littles. This cooperation must be voluntary. For the cooperation to be voluntary, the have-nots and the have-littles must believe that it would not be right or reasonable to take away what the have-plenties have. In other words, they must believe that for all its problems, the present social, political, and economic order, with its disparities of wealth and power and privilege, is about the best that human beings can do. More specifically, the have-nots and have-littles must believe that they are not being exploited by the have-plenties. Now, this seems to This seems to me to add up to an extremely plausible argument that ours is a social system that requires for its continued operation a set of beliefs necessary to secure the allegiance of the less well-off majority. These beliefs must be in some considerable degree false because the distribution of wealth and power in the United States is so evidently arbitrary and unjust. Ergo, the need for ideology.
Smart founders know something most people miss. Get your domain name even if you're not ready to launch your business. With Wix, you can grab yours now and then get to work. Here's why it matters. Back in 2019, I had this killer business idea, but I delayed getting the domain name because I wasn't ready. That was a huge mistake. Someone else grabbed it, built the exact same business I planned, and now they're making all the money that I could have been making. And that's why I'm sharing this. Locking down your domain name is crucial, and on Wix, it's super fast. They handle all the tricky tech stuff for you, making it seamless. And honestly, having a domain name gives your idea instant credibility. A domain name isn't just a name, it's a way to claim your space and take your idea seriously. Because once it's taken, you're stuck paying a premier price for it or losing it. So go to Wix right now, search your idea. If the domain is available, grab it.
Imagine being able to build an app with your name on it, just by thinking about it. Meet Base 44, a complete AI creation platform. Describe what you want, and watch it take shape. You can plan, customize, and expand